Hello everyone, Storm 1 here. Today we'll be tracking the potential for strong, maybe locally severe storms as we get into Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. Got another chance for showers, even a few storms again for Saturday. And then we got a major pattern change coming up next week as Old Man Winter tries to come back into our region. Let's get started with the watch warning advisory display across the country. It's been pretty quiet across the central and eastern United States. Got some fog issues down towards the Gulf Coast and even along the East Coast. Meanwhile, in the Northeast, got a lot of winter weather alerts. Areas of pink are winter storm warnings. And then areas in purple are winter weather advisories out there. So they're seeing a pretty good amount of winter weather out there. And even across central and northern California, dealing with quite a bit of rain. There's even some flood watches mixed in there as well. And meanwhile, the rest of the country, for the most part, is quiet. High temperatures today, and boy did it feel good outside. Most of us got to the low 70s, even some mid 70s out there. Some of us got to 74 degrees, so spring fever out there. And only a handful of us did not quite make it to the 70-degree mark, and hopefully people are outside enjoying this, because it's probably going to be the last time we see 70s for a while. So let's talk more about temperatures. This was the high temperature forecast today, and overall verified pretty well. Most of us got into the 70s. This is the high temperatures for tomorrow, and you can see here we got a cold front that's going to be moving through the state later tonight and into tomorrow. Cooler temperatures across the north, warmer across the south. The temperatures generally along the north is 64. It's in the mid to upper 40s, and then areas south of 64 is in the low to mid 50s, with some upper 50s out there, especially towards the Tennessee border. I think some of us could get to the upper 50s to maybe about around 60 degrees down there. And then that front there kind of washes itself out just a little bit here, but there is some disagreements here with some of the National Service offices here. National Service in Louisville and Jackson, which they cover these areas in here, generally agree on, areas north of 64, mid to upper 40s to around 50, and then areas south of 64 in the mid to upper 50s with some low 60s down towards the Tennessee border. And then Paducah is notably cooler compared to the rest of the offices here. They like the 50s the most, and I think they'll warm up a little bit more as we get closer here. But that front there kind of washes itself out a little bit, and then the mild air kind of begins to win the battle. But we also got showers and storms that's going to start to move in here later today on Wednesday, and that's going to continue to Wednesday night out there. So temperatures would be pretty chilly to start out there as well. But temperatures will warm up. Even through the evening, the temperatures will continue to warm. And this is the high temperatures for Thursday. And we start to trend cooler once again as that front passes through. Highs in the mid to upper 40s across the north. I think this is actually the temperatures for Friday. I think as soon as I started this video here, I think some of these maps here are starting to update. So I believe these are temperatures for Friday and not Thursday. So I don't have the map for Thursday, but I'll tell you Thursday would be in the 60s for most of us. Northern Kentucky would be in the 50s. And I think this is the high temperatures for Friday. If we go to the next slide here, seems like something's being messed up here on Pivot Weather. I'm not sure why, but this is the high temperatures for Friday. It's going to be notably chillier. Generally along the north of 64 in the 40s, and then down across southern Kentucky, especially down towards the Tennessee border, low to mid 50s. And as we get into Saturday, we start to warm up again. And there's even a potential for near 70-degree readings. That's actually warmer than the previous forecast that I looked at. But most of us stay in the 60s out there. But some more showers and storms will try to roll in here once again. And then the high temperatures for Sunday, we trend chillier again, and it pretty much stays that way. And I believe this is for next Monday. And you can see here we are in the 40s, and it pretty much stays that way. And that's the beginning of the pattern change as well, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. And let's look at some weather models here. Let's check out our first storm chance for this week here. So, and that's basically for Wednesday evening and into Thursday morning. So this is getting into Wednesday afternoon. Across western Kentucky, have some showers, maybe even a couple storms try to mix in there. And rain could be heavy at times. We may get a brief break in there, but some more showers and storms start to develop Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. This is when our strong severe storm chance starts to come into play here. And for that, we're actually going to move to the NAM model. That was the high-res NAM. I was just only showing the high-res NAM for the reflectivity standpoint. But this is the NAM here. Some similarities there. But let's talk a little bit deeper about the strong severe storm potential. So this is going to be happening mainly in the overnight hours. And we basically got a shortwave trough that's going to move in here. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like a bowling ball of energy coming in here, which is enough to increase lift in the atmosphere, and you can get some showers and storms that develop. Now, the NAM model is a little bit farther north of that shortwave, but if we check out those 500 millibar winds, we notice we got something that's known as a jet streak, which is right in here, areas in red. So, and it's mainly off to our northwest, and typically with these jet streaks, along and ahead of that jet streak is usually where you get the best lift for storms to fire out there. And if we check out the lull of a jet, which is at 850 millibars, we got some stronger winds out there, as you would expect for the overnight hours, especially during the winter time. But let's talk about something important, is those thermodynamics, which is basically your temperatures, dew points, and your instability. Let's check the dew points first. And normally for severe weather, especially during the winter time, you want dew points in the 60s. We got that in western Kentucky. Dew points in generally the low 60s, can ever out to mid 60s out there. And sometimes the modeling tends to underestimate moisture return, so it's possible that some of these numbers here could be a little bit higher than what is being shown here. But we got dew points in the low to mid 60s, especially in western Kentucky. So that's a start out there. And of course, temperatures there, it'll actually be pretty mild. I mean, when we talk about temperatures, getting into Thursday morning will actually be pretty mild. Maybe the only exception would be far north of Kentucky. You can see where your front is. I mean, it's 50s across most of the state, and then you get to around Cincinnati, it's actually close to freezing. So a pretty sharp cutoff in the temperatures there as you get into Wednesday night and into Thursday morning out there. And let's talk about instability. Now, this is surface-based CAPE here. This is one of the ways we measure instability in our atmosphere. And this is basically instability down to just about where we are. Just about. And you can see here, getting into Thursday morning, we got instability exceeding 500 joules per kilogram, which for the winter time, especially during this time of day, that's actually pretty good. That's pretty good. Now, sometimes the NAM could be a little bit bullish, so it might be a little bit overdone, but still, that's not bad out there. But let's check out another product. What about most unstable CAPE? You see there's a little bit of a difference here. I'm going to go back a little bit, 3 hours. There's a big difference between surface-based CAPE, which only measures instability towards the surface, and most unstable CAPE tells you where the most of the CAPE is anywhere in the atmosphere. You notice here you got numbers exceeding 1,000 in some places, which then again could be a little bit overdone. But where is this instability coming from? Usually when we look at instability, we mostly look at surface-based, but sometimes we have to look at most unstable CAPE. which you can see here once again it's around 1,000. So where's this cape coming from? Well, if we get a forecast sounding out there, it may take us a few seconds to load here. You can see what's going on here, and this is something when it comes to overnight severe weather setups, is the storms tend to be elevated. And what we mean by elevated, there's usually an inversion between the surface and certain parts of the atmosphere. Sometimes the inversion could be way up here, sometimes it could be closer to the surface, which in this case here, the inversion is towards the surface here. We can still get storms even with that inversion out there, but the difference between elevated storms and surface-based when it comes to the severe weather threats is that usually with surface-based storms you can get all of the above. Conditions can favor, hail, wind, and even tornadoes when storms are surface-based. But when they're elevated, like it's showing across central and eastern Kentucky, its only risk is for hail. And the main reason why is when you have that inversion in the lower levels, it's kind of acts as a roadblock for those winds. So those winds will have a very hard time getting through that inversion that we have out there. So it basically significantly reduces the risk for wind, and it makes a tornado risk non-existent. Now, here's the tricky part. We got some surface-based cape in western Kentucky, which if we get it sounding out there in western Kentucky, you can see here it's a little bit different. You actually got an instability going all the way down towards the surface. We still got some elevated instability, so there's enough instability to favor some strong severe storms. So let's look at some of the parameters here. So if we look at our wind shear values down here, you can see here we got some pretty good wind shear values. I mean, SRH values is anywhere from 300 to 400. That's pretty solid. That's enough wind shear to support some severe weather. Another thing I usually look at is the wind bars. What's the wind direction with height? So at the surface, winds are out of the southeast. But as you get up to around 700 millibars, which is several thousand feet above our heads, it's mainly due west. With that wind change direction of height, as you get that thunderstorm updraft going, the winds turn, which can help organize some storms out there. And if we look at our hodograph there, that hodograph can support supercell structures. So we may even see a couple of supercells out there. Now, if we can get storms to develop here, which not all models show storms here, this could favor the potential for maybe all hazards. I'm still skeptical about the tornado potential, but I am confident enough there could be some hail and even some strong wind gusts with some of these storms here. A limiting factor for sure is those near surface lap rates. Those near surface lap rates are pretty weak. But when I look into the mid-level lap rates, that's favorable for some hail out there. So really the main concern for Wednesday night and Thursday morning is that hail risk that could be out there. Strong winds could be possible. Tornado risk still questionable right now. I'm going to give it another day or so. See if we can figure out with that tornado risk potential. But for right now, I'm going to say there's no tornado risk, but that could potentially change here. Now, once again, if the storms stay elevated, then there's no tornado risk. But if some of those storms end up becoming surface-based, that's a little bit different. So that's going to be something to watch for. But another thing, too, is that there's a little bit of a displacement. I'm going to go back to 500 millibar winds very quick, because this is also important. The jet streak is north of the favorable thermodynamics. So your favorable thermos is down here, especially surface-based. But those stronger winds are loftier north. So there's a bit of a displacement here. If we can get this jet streak here to trend a little bit south, so like if this jet streak were to come through something like this, then that would be a more favorable environment for strong severe storms, and that can elevate that risk. So that'd be something to watch for. And there is a model that shows that, and that's the European model. You can see here it's a little bit different here, but that jet streak is no way farther south here. And if overlaps with favorable thermodynamics. If you look at your dew points, it does overlap those low 60 dew points. So the European model does show a little bit more of a favorable setup for strong severe storms. If we look at most unstable Cape, there is instability out there for those storms to feed on. And if you look at the low of a jet at 850 millibars, you got some strong winds out there. And notably, if you look at temperatures, towards the surface here, you can see here, if you look at your wind bars, especially out towards central Kentucky, it's almost due south. In western Kentucky, it's just about from the southeast, so you got wind direction of height. And the main reason why the European model setup shows a better severe weather set for us is one of the reasons that not only it's farther south, but it's also got a little bit of a stronger surface low. It's got a 1004 surface low near St. Louis. If we end up trending towards the European model, then there could be a better risk for strong severe storms Wednesday night and Thursday morning. So that's a time frame to watch. Right now, the storm prediction doesn't have anything highlight for us, but it would not surprise me if we could see a marginal risk get issued. I think they'll start in western Kentucky, but they may get expanded over time. So we gotta watch Wednesday night to Thursday morning time frame for that potential for strong into severe storms. And here's a little kind of graphic here. It's not really a graphic, but here's a little thing I do here, on X. Anytime there's potential for strong severe storms, to kind of give you guys the better idea of my thoughts on this. So the wind risk is very low. Winds could potentially be up to 45 miles an hour, so that's not too bad. Could be local high water concerns. I'm not too concerned about the flooding potential. I think it's going to stay very low unless you see training of storms, and that's a little bit different. No threat on the tornado risk, at least for now. That could change as we get closer. But the hail risk is the main hazard. It's still a low risk, but hail could be potentially up the size of quarters, so that is a severe storm criteria, quarter size hail. So yeah, potential is certainly there for strong severe storms. We'll keep an eye on it as we get closer. So with that out of the way, let's go a little bit beyond that. So the European model does suggest there could be another round of some storms there later today on Thursday. That's when the actual cold front comes through, but the setup doesn't look near as good Thursday afternoon, but we'll still keep an eye on that just in case. We say mostly dry for Friday, but here comes our next system here, getting into Saturday here, and the European model shows a stronger low. Now, I think the European model is going to be too strong with this low here. I think it will trend weaker as we get closer. But if that ends up being correct, there could be another chance for strong storms Saturday, though I'm not really concerned about Saturday. Cold front passes through, and then we start to get into this pattern change here. And you will notice here that front kind of stays south of Kentucky, so temperatures will be colder. But here comes a storm system going through the four corner states. We also got plenty of cold air to work with across really basically the northern 2/3 of the country is on the colder side. And look what starts to happen here next week. So the Gulf of Mexico is going to be wide open for moisture return here. So there's going to be plenty of moisture for whatever system's coming up next week. It's going to have no shortage of moisture. Gulf of Mexico wide open. And you can see what happens here. Now, it is one model, one solution, but I'm showing you guys this as an example. But the European model does suggest a pretty good snow event for the Ohio Valley and even into the Mid-Atlantic. So that system passes through, then another system pops up behind that, possibly. Now, we're getting beyond the 10-day period, so whatever storm system is going to show, it's not going to be on point or anything, but I'm just showing you guys this as an example of what we could be looking at. You can see here shows another storm system there. The cold air is still in place to the north, and it shows a pretty nasty shot of Arctic air behind that. There goes a clipper, and then here comes another system. So you kind of get the gist here that next week it's going to be active. You're going to have multiple storm systems out there. Precip type is still a little bit questionable, but it's definitely going to be a colder pattern. And to be honest with you, this is a very good look for winter storms, especially from the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast. And I'll show you guys some of the ensembles of what they suggest. So this is the 5-hour millbar height anomalies using a 5-day average. So this is from February the 12th through the 17th. So this is basically through a good chunk of next week. And you can see what's happening here. So what we got going on here, if we look up to our north, up towards the Arctic Circle, you notice here there's a lot of ridging going on up there. So you got a ridge, looks like over Alaska. There's another one that goes off the screen, but it's northeast of Greenland. And all this blocking here basically covers the entire Arctic Circle, which disrupts the polar vortex. And when you get disruption to polar vortex, it's much more wavy and also pushes the colder air farther south, which means that we have cold air to work with here in the United States. And you can see here we got below normal heights across southern Canada and into the northern part of the country. So that's part of the polar vortex up there, which means there's plenty of cold air to work with. What's also interesting with this pattern here is that we also have a southeast ridge, which covers the southeast and maybe even parts of the mid-Atlantic coastline. But we do have a southeast ridge that's out there, which makes a difference compared to the winter weather pattern we've had back in January, which really the main difference between this upcoming pattern and this one here coming up is that there will be a southeast ridge this time. The pattern back in January did not have a southeast ridge. We will have a southeast ridge this time thanks to the La Nina that is developed in the equatorial Pacific down there, which is having an influence on our pattern out here. And that southeast ridge makes things more interesting for us. So that's the European ensembles. If we check out the GFS ensembles, pretty similar. It's got pretty much the same idea the European ensemble shows. What about the Canadian ensembles? Not that much different. So you got all three of your major ensemble members on board. Let's talk about temperatures here. So this is the 5-day 2-meter temperature anomalies. Now you can see where your temperatures are here in terms of the below normal and the above normal temperatures. Very strong signal for potentially well below normal temperatures from the upper Midwest through the central and northern plains, across parts of the Pacific Northwest up into Canada. At the same time, we have a good signal for above normal temperatures covering a good chunk of the southeast, which would include the Carolinas, Florida, Georgia, and even the deep south. Meanwhile, here in Kentucky, we're right in between those two air masses, which means that active storm track, at least based off an average, goes right over us. And that is where the battle zone is going to be. And that's also where you're going to see the greatest potential for winter storms. Yeah, you heard me. Winter storms could be in play with this pattern here, especially with this gradient within the temperature anomalies. Now, don't be too mistaken here. I know the average mean here shows near normal temperatures. That's not necessarily going to be the case here. It's either going to be above normal or below normal. There's going to be a tight gradient in the temperature anomalies. And those near normal temperature anomalies are going to be few far in between. I'm just going to let you guys know that right away because it's a very volatile pattern and we can easily flip warm to cold, warm to cold. It's a very volatile pattern because you got the southeast ridge fighting with the Arctic air. And when you get those two air masses fighting each other, you're going to have some problems in between here. Some of that could be in the form of, winter weather. Sometimes it could be in the form of, springtime thunderstorms in some cases. If we check out the GFS ensembles for temperature anomalies, you know what? Pretty much the same thing. What about the Canadian ensembles? It's colder, but it's got that similar look here. And if we check out precipitation, this is also another thing we got to look into is those precipitation anomalies, because these precipitation anomalies will tell you where most of your storm tracks could be during this time frame. So this is basically from February 10th through the 17th. It's a 7-day average. You can clearly see where your above normal precipitation is going to be. Highest numbers are just south of Kentucky. If you want a winter storm in Kentucky, that's actually a good thing, because precipitation anomalies rely heavily on rain and not so much on snow. Snow is much more drier than compared to rain droplets. Keep in mind of that. If you check out the GFS ensembles, kind of a similar thing here. Some of those higher precipitation anomalies are just south of Kentucky. And what about the Canadian ensembles? Pretty much the same thing. So you got a very impressive agreement with the ensembles. So putting all this together, what does this mean for Kentucky? Averaging out as a whole. Well, let me use the GFS ensembles here. So basically your average storm track is going to look something like this. Now, not every storm track is going to look like this, but this is where your average storm track is going to be. So I'm going to put 2 of those low signatures there and put the arrow here. So your average low pressure system track could look something like this, which most of these lows are either going to track over Kentucky or just south. If it ends up tracking over Kentucky, then we may see mixed precipitation modes. But if it tracks south of Kentucky, that's when your winter storm potential comes into play. Okay? This is a very favorable pattern for big winter storms, regardless of where this low is going to track or where these storm systems are going to track. So it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on as we get closer, because some places may get a ton of snow out of this pattern here. And, going back to the European model, you can clearly see that where some of these storm systems can have, quite a bit of snow. Now, this model run's not enthusiastic with the snow compared to previous runs, but another way we can look into the snow potential is looking into the snowfall mean. We'll use the GFS ensembles for this one here. Real quick here. And this is going to be the 18Z run. And if I go to mean snow accumulation, you're going to really tell where there's the greatest potential for snow, and even including winter storms as well. There will certainly be winter storms within this pattern here next week. And you can see here going towards the end of the run, you can really see where the model really likes the greatest snow potential. It's the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Some of those areas may pick up a ton of snow. The main reason why is that there's going to be 2 different types of storm tracks. One storm track is going to go through something like this. So kind of go through the upper Midwest or Great Lakes into the Northeast. Those are clipper type of systems. And then the secondary track would be something like this. And that's the storm track we got to watch for potential for winter storms as well, which you can see here. There's a pretty good indicator on snow out there. Pretty good signal out there. And if you were to compare it to the European ensembles and the Canadian ensembles, they're a little more enthusiastic with the snow. So really the general area to watch for winter storms next week, I think there's going to be more than one. But the general area to really watch next week for winter storm potential is going to be in here. Probably maybe even up here too with the other track. So really the area circled red, which includes the entire state of Kentucky, could be favored to see at least one winter storm next week. Now, if I want to give you guys a particular time frame to really watch, it's probably going to be right around February 12th, which I believe that is next Wednesday, if I'm correct. I believe that's, next Wednesday. So next Wednesday or around February 12th is a time frame to really watch, because the models do have a pretty good signal on a storm coming through Kentucky. Some of them show a winter storm for us, some of them a little bit north. I mean, it is far out, but it is a strong signal, and when you got a strong signal on the model guidance, it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on. And one more thing, I almost forgot. There is one more thing, and that's the Climate Prediction Center. And these guys here do pretty well on a lot of their forecast maps. They tend to be pretty accurate. So we'll start off with the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. So this is from February 9th through the 13th. Temperatures, near normal. This is the area of greatest uncertainty for temperatures, because it's either going to be below normal or above in a lot of these days here. There's a lot of uncertainty here of how much the southeast ridge is going to flex, or the timing, or how strong the cold air is going to be. Those are stuff to kind of iron out will kind of iron out itself as we get closer. But we're kind of an area of greatest uncertainty on how those two air masses are going to fight each other. But regardless of how that plays out, precipitation is definitely going to be above normal, with the highest probabilities just south of us. Days 8 through 14, this is when we start to trend colder. And I think beyond February 12th, I think we're going to stay on the cold side for a little bit. So from February 11th through the 17th, entire state of Kentucky with a risk for below normal temperatures. But then again, with precip, it's still above normal, which means the pattern does continue to stay accurate. And if we look at the probability outlook for temperatures, the harsh cold, I think, is going to stay northwest of us. And you can see that high risk for well below normal temperatures across parts of Montana and North Dakota. That's where some of the harsh stuff is going to be in terms of the cold. Now, for precipitation, we do have a slight risk for heavy precipitation. Most of that probably in the form of rain, but some of that can be in the form of snow. Which, speaking of snow, this is the risk of heavy snow. They got a slight risk that includes the entire state of Kentucky. Now, usually I'm skeptical about their heavy snow risk outlooks, because a decent chunk of the times they don't verify. But this time around, I agree with this. I actually do agree with this, with us being in a slight risk for heavy snow. And this goes from February 11th through the 15th. So this would be the general area to watch for winter storm potential during this time frame. As it stands, I don't think we're going to see any major changes as we get closer, but we'll definitely have some tweaks, as we get closer to this time frame here. And no risk for high winds, which is good. But the main thing we got to watch for is these winter storm risks, because the pattern next week would be very favorable for winter storms from the Ohio Valley and the Mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this as we get closer. But anyways, guys, this is all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys liked this video, hit that like button. If you really like my channel, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications in there if you miss an upload. If you guys got any questions, you can put a comment section down below. I'll answer you guys questions. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.